So by tomorrow morning, you will have a YouTube file that I will send to your email address, how to access it, and it will review this session for you. So in a way that kind of saves you from having to take notes while we're doing it. I actually believe that the best way to learn is just to pay maximum attention to what we're talking about, not to take notes. When people take notes, it just kind of slows things down. And you don't need to, because you're going to be able to review it if you need to. Okay, good. So let me give you another one. Another first elementary one. Notice the coefficient is 1 on the x squared term. Hold on a second. I wrote this wrong. Just a second. Let me do it like this. Doing these backwards is hard. All right. There's the quadratic. Now, usually the reason you set it equal to 0 is because I know I'm going to take that quadratic and make it the multiplication of two terms. So I want it equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, I still can't solve it. But if it's equal to 0, I can solve it. So let's go through the steps. What's the first step? Okay. Now, second step, determine both sides. Not one side, both sides. Perfect. Now, give me factors of 25 that add, because of that, to 10. And exactly, that's the answer right there, factor. Okay. That was as easy as they get because there were only 3 steps. Now I'm going to make it slightly more complicated. Not a lot, just slightly. Okay. First step. Okay. Second step. Nope. You cannot produce a negative 10 if it was negative on both sides. Remember, the last step of multiplication is multiplying the constant times the constant. So if they were both negative, I would end up with a positive. So the fact that I have a negative 10 means the signs have to be opposite. They could be plus minus or minus plus, but it doesn't matter where I put each. I just know they have to be opposite. It's the only way I can produce a minus 10. So now the last step, not the last step, the third step, is I'm looking for factors of 10 that don't add to 3, but subtract to 3. Whatever the sign is in front of that 10, that's what they have to do. Well, I'm still looking at 5 and 2. Those are factors of 10 that subtract to the number 3. That's all. I got it right. Now I have to figure out which side to put the 5 on. Well, put the bigger factor, the 5, with the sign of the middle term. So the 5 goes right there because the sign on the middle term is negative. That leaves a 2 there. Now, let's multiply these two together. When you're first working with factoring, it's always a good idea to take your answers and multiply it together to make sure you got what you started with. Okay, that's x squared. That's minus 5x. That's plus 2x. And plus 2 times minus 5 is minus 10. Now, you can usually combine those two terms. So, because they're both x's, I can combine like terms. That's what I started with. That means I did it right. Okay. Elementary factoring problems, that's about as hard as it gets. Where And, you know, maybe 10% of the problems you will be given maybe have something like this, where they don't have a 1. It's a 3, you know. And to be honest with you, I don't even know a quadratic that I can put in here, but let me think for a minute. Maybe I can figure it out. Let's see. Yeah, this should work. Factor that. Now, understand that this is much harder. Most of the problems they're going to test you on is going to have a 1 in front of that x squared. And those will be easy. Just use the method we just went through, okay? When it's a bigger number, you still split up the x's. Well, as the first step, well, the only way to split up the x's is like that. I mean, I could put the x on the left and the 3x on the right. That doesn't really matter. The fact is I got to split up the x's, okay? Now, I still know that because of that, my signs have to be opposite. But in this case, plus minus is not quite the same as minus plus, so I have to allow for both. Might be either one. Okay? And also now, because it's a harder quadratic, I don't have these rules. I can't say factors of 15 that subtract to the number 12 or anything like that. I just kind of have to do trial and error. But the one thing I have to have is factors of 15. Well, there's not a lot of factors of 15. There's 2, and there's the other 2. That's it. So I'm always going to start with the 2 closest ones. That's just a good practice to do, okay? And now it's a random process. It's a trial and error process. I'm just going to start anywhere. I'm going to start 5 and 3, like that. And now I'm going to check what my middle term is, because I know that the first term is going to be 3x squared, and I know the last term is going to be minus 15. I'm trying to produce a minus 12x in the middle. So the only thing I really care about is that middle term, and you get the middle term from multiplying the inside and the outside, adding them together. Well, that's minus 4x, so that's not correct. Well, let's move the 5 down to there. Nah, that ain't going to be correct. That's just going to give me a plus 4x. Let's switch the 5 and the 3. Let's put a 3 there and a 5 there. Okay? Now, if we multiply the insides, we get plus 3x. If we multiply the outsides, we get minus 15x. Add those together, bingo, we got the answer, minus 12x. That is our middle term right there. So the answer to this problem is 3x plus 3 times x minus 5. And if you multiply those two together, you will get what you started with. And that's the name of the game in factoring. Now, yeah, I hesitated to even introduce the higher level quadratics to you because that's, like I said, only 10% of the problems you ever get are going to be higher level quadratics. So the most important thing for you to understand is how to do simple quadratics. And by simple quadratics, I mean when that's a 1. Only when that's a 1. Okay, and if that's a 1, it's never more than a 4-step process. Let me give you some more. Let's just test you. Let's stay away from the harder level quadratics. Let me just give you a simple one. Let me think for a moment. I'm going to make this a little extra hard. It's still simple, but it's a little harder to factor. First step, Second step. Very good. And notice that in this case, plus minus is exactly the same as minus plus. In other words, I don't have to allow for a plus minus on the left side and a plus minus on the right. And the reason that is because the coefficients of each x is the same. If the coefficients of each x term is the same, then it doesn't matter where I put the plus and where I put the minus. What's the third step? Hold on. That's where we're looking at right there. You want factors of 12. Well, give me all the factors of 12. Four times 3. That's it. Okay, that's the sum total of the factors of 12. There's no other factors of 12. Okay, so now the rule, we can go back to our rules because we have an elementary quadratic. So I want factors of 12 that subtract, because of that negative sign right there, to the coefficient of the middle term. What's the coefficient of the middle term? It's 1. It's -1, but forget the negative sign for a moment. It's 1. So which factors subtract to the number 1? No, 12 and 1 subtract to 11. I want the set of factors. There's only 3 factors. There's that set of factors, there's that set, and there's that set. I want you to tell me which set subtract to the number 1. Absolutely. Now, that's 3 steps. There is one more step when you have opposite signs. That's a 4th step. You have to know where to put the 4 and where to put the 3. Look to the middle term. What's the sign on the middle term? Put the larger factor, the 4, right there. That leaves the other factor for there. Now, here's a good tip. I don't need to actually FOIL this to check my answer. I know that my x squared is correct, and I know that my minus 12 is correct. The only term I'm not positive of is that middle term. And the way you produce the middle term is by the inside and the outside. Okay? The inside multiplies to plus 3x. The outside multiplies to minus 4x. Add them together, you get minus 1x. That is our middle term. That means we did it correctly. In other words, I don't have to fully FOIL that back. It's just a lot of extra work. When you're trying to check whether your factoring is correct or not, you really only need to check the middle term. It's going to be very unusual if you've got these end terms wrong, because the whole way we do factoring is based on those end terms. In other words, when you split up the x squared, it's x times x. You're not going to make a mistake there, okay? And plus 3 times minus 4 is minus 12. You're not going to make a mistake there. Where the mistake is made is with getting that correct middle term. You always have to make sure you have the correct middle term. Okay. That's probably a good place to stop, Joshua. So you're in Colorado right now, or you're visiting your grandparents? Okay. Yeah. I used to live there for 3 years. Where are you from originally? Where do you go to high school? Oh, that's right. You told me that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, I understand now. So anyway, about the only thing we covered today was factoring, but I feel like we did a pretty good job of covering factoring. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Joshua, the secret to math is to remember the method. It's not to be able to factor a quadratic. It's remembering that there are exactly 3 or 4 steps. What the first step is, what the second step is, what the third step is, and then if there is a 4th step, what is that? And if you can memorize those, you're never going to miss one. Honestly, you won't. That is the secret, is you have to memorize the method. Whether you're factoring or solving an equation or whatever it is you're doing in math, there's a method that you want to use, and that's what you memorize. Okay, I will let you go. This first session is only a half hour long, and you obviously know how to schedule an appointment, or somebody does, your mom or dad or grandparents. You are, I would love to work with you, and if you want to do another session, you just go to my website and schedule it. That's perfect. Fridays are great because I don't have a lot of students that want tutoring on Fridays, so I have much more availability. Wednesdays, you can imagine that most of my students want times between 3 and 9 o'clock, right? And that's the case. So I still have certainly half-hour sessions available on Wednesday, and even some hour sessions if you wanted that. But boy, if you can do Friday, you're always going to have availability on Friday. Okay. Joshua, I will let you go and look forward to working with you further. You're welcome.